Welcome to the Whitetail Legacy Podcast.
And we get the back view of him. And I mean, it's just a mega.
52 yards is a long shot. Magnum PI, what we named him. No idea.
Just a magnum.
Yeah, just a magnum.
Come on cam last year, we said probably 150, mid 150.
Yeah.
Same doe from the morning come out with that 9-pointer.
Here steps out this 90-inch 8-pointer. You're like,
I'm like, okay, well, there's still a buck back there grunting.
Yeah.
And then out steps like another 90-inch 8-pointer. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
Bro.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm like, deer right there.
Yeah, like
and he's already
yards.
30 yards.
Yeah.
He was literally 5 yards from the base of the tree. Could have been, had a buck down at 1:40 in the afternoon, back there deep on public. 3 does come out pretty early. It was like 245, 24-yard shot, sent the combat veteran, and I tell you what, man, dude, it just smoked. We always get so jacked up when the other person kills. It's just almost like we got it done.
Yeah. And when you killed that doe, I was like, hell yeah, man.
And we come down here to Missouri.
I asked Comey one more time. I'm like, is it a good buck? And he goes, yeah, real good, solid buck. I'm like, all right, boom. And the deer just drops. Sure. Super special to me.
Whitetail Legacy Podcast, bringing you back to the hunt and leaving a legacy. Baller Rut.
This is the Whitetail Legacy Podcast, and the freaking cold front's coming. The bucks are going to be hitting the ground. It's time to get out there and get in the woods, and we got Damian Riffle on to tell you how to do it.
Right now.
Right now, like tomorrow.
Yes.
We are talking new moon hunting at its finest, an off-the-wall topic. We love to find these guys. We found them on the Exodus Trail Cam Radio. I listened to this guy's podcast. It was a completely different tactic than I've ever heard, and I've fallen in love with it. And the new moon is coming up. It's tomorrow, guys, and the cold front's hitting. This is patterning out to be perfect. If you're in the Midwest, listen to this episode. Go out and kill that buck that you've been after. Let's get into the people that make this possible and get into this absolute fire episode. Sorry about the veteran broadhead. The bucks are hitting the ground with the broadhead this year, man.
Yes.
The does are hitting the ground. There is a ton of people shooting the combat veteran and veteran this year. The amount of support this broadhead has got from last year to this year is insane. And the only thing it is I mean, it's people are seeing the success of other people and picking the broadhead. You know what I mean? And with all this stuff going on right now, choosing an American-made product is pretty solid because you know it's going to be in stock.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's another reason that people are, choosing it. Do you have the veteran VIP shout-out?
Yeah, this week's shout-out's going to be Adam Brooks. And Adam served in the Army for 12 years. And Adam did 2 tours overseas and now is glad to be home and spending time with his family, which is his wife and 2 daughters. And Adam is actually an Illinoisan, so that was kind of close to home to us. So glad to shout you out here, Adam, and we appreciate your service here in the Army.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. 2 tours, that's a lot. I'm glad you're back home safe with your family. Appreciate everything you did, letting us be free and release this podcast. Let's get an ECW calls, all your custom call needs, right out of Roseville, Illinois. Jeff, just like every other small business, struggling in these times of COVID and all this stuff going on. Cool that we can still rep him and, help him get a little bit of business into that small town. Just a guy chasing his dream, another veteran making an American-made product and trying to get some deer on the ground and help other people be successful too. So you can check him out at embrycustomwoodworking.com. Exodus. We're going to talk about the render, and the reason we're going to talk about the render is because we got the render in on the biggest deer that we got to hunt.
Yeah.
Take the most solid cam you got, the most recent intel, and put it right where you think the deer is going to be coming out.
Exactly.
It's like the most simplest thing to do, but if you didn't have a render, can't do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Got the most solid cam in the game, right on the biggest deer that we got, where we think he's coming out. We might be wrong, we might be right. Well, we're gonna find out in about 2 days. You know what I mean?
Right.
Do we need to move this deer? Do we need to move the? I wish we could move the deer. That'd be awesome.
That
do we
would
need to move
be
the cam?
super solid. I know a good spot.
Yeah, I know a real solid spot, real easy access. Just pop them over there.
Yeah, just go back to the west side.
Yeah,
bud.
just go over there. But anyway, yeah, but we got him in. We got it in on Magnum, and we're excited to be getting some pictures. And that's just the beauty of having a render in there. That exact intel within minute. And you know what? Another thing I like about the render, I like that midnight update. I wish all mobile cams did that, because you have that spot where like your mobile cam hasn't got pictures for 2 days, and you're like, what's going on? Is it working?
Yeah.
Is it not
There
working?
should be deer there. It's a good spot.
But there just hasn't been any deer there. But that render sends you an update.
It sends you a status report at midnight.
Yeah, that's nice.
Boom.
So you know it's working. Like, I didn't get any pick today, but hey, it's still working. I wish every trail cam company would pick that up. That's a super solid.
It's a good feeling to wake up and at least have that notification from Scout Tech. At least a midnight status update.
Yeah, so you know that it's still out there working.
Exactly.
All right. You have Last Breath TV.
Yeah, I just want to touch on an episode that they put out a couple weekends ago, or actually last weekend, about Grant's buck of Harold. And a lot of people want to view their videos and think that they're not, real weekend warriors, or, they're hunting some, upper end farms. All these guys are putting in the weekend work just like you and I are, and they're making their own success by putting in these mock scrapes and monitoring these trail cameras, using the cell cams like they need to, and hunting smart. And when all of that comes together, you want it to be, that moment. And that moment happened for Grant here in this last week's episode. But he hit that deer in the shoulder, and it really portrayed that they are actually really hunting. And, it's something that, I feel like everybody should watch, because it happens to everybody. If you bow hunt long enough, it's going to happen. And I think it was props to them for doing that. And, there's a lot of great footage, and it's a great story. And it's just a great episode about bow hunting in general.
Yeah, being a normal dude out there.
Yeah.
That's one thing, like, if you look at their quality and how many bucks they kill, it competes with a lot of other teams and stuff that are going to multiple outfitters a year to be able to kill that many deer.
Exactly.
And these guys are doing it on their small pieces that they've either got permission or leased or worked for or whatever, you know what I mean? And they don't say that a lot. People don't know that they're out there just normal dudes. They ain't going to, whitetail heaven or whatever.
Like,
you know what I mean?
Grant teaches the 8th grade math.
Yeah. Like,
at a school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're not doing it full time. They're not out whitetail heaven shooting a velvet buck. You know what I mean? They're not doing that kind of stuff. They're putting in the work to make these properties successful. And, if you hunt long enough, like homie says, there's stories like this, and it's props to them, because a lot of teams wouldn't even release a story like that. Mm-hmm. But it shows realism. It shows you can relate to these guys. People, you hit a buck in the shoulder. It happens to someone every year out there. You know what I mean? Multiple people, and it's tragic. But then if you follow through the season, he comes out like, and successful on another deer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hard work, putting the time in. I mean, can't say enough about those guys. Ingram's Outdoor Session, all your taxidermy needs, right there in Oneida, Illinois, guys. The guy's still pumping out bucks. Solid friend. Had a little whitetail talk with him today. It was pretty cool. I told him, dude, this guy, when you got to get on a deer, you got to get on a deer.
Yeah.
So he drilled holes and duct taped a sawzall blade to a long stick to cut some limbs that were up too high. I'm like, if that isn't whatever it takes,
yes,
that is a definition of whatever it takes. I'm like, dude, I got a 20-foot pole saw you can borrow
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah,
He's
let
like,
us
oh,
know.
really?
No.
He's like, yeah, just come out and grab it in the garage.
Put it in the memory bank,
Yeah,
bro.
yeah,
We got
but yeah,
you.
he duct taped and drilled holes and ran screws into a long stick
Wow.
to cut branches with a sawzall blade.
Guys out there trying to get it done.
Yeah, get props to that. So, all right, let's get into the show. All right, guys, we got Damian Riffle on the podcast. How you doing tonight?
Good, man. How are you?
Appreciate it. I appreciate you wrapping up the bear hunt and coming on the show and staying up a little late with us and podcasting. It was pretty cool. This is the first time ever podcast was like, if I kill, I'm not going to make it. If I don't kill, I'll be on. So pretty solid of you, man.
Well, I guess unfortunately here I am.
Yeah, I
so.
know. I was like, I hope you kill me. Can't do this. It's the first time I ever said, I hope you can't come on at the time I asked you to come on. But I listened to you on Exodus podcast, and you're, the moon. I don't want to call it a theory because it's not a theory because it's working. What should I call it? It's something that's working. Moon process. I'm going to go with process, okay?
All right.
Yeah, I've used that before.
Your moon process is it's completely different than everybody else's. And I listened to the podcast, and then I backed it up with looking at my trail cam data, and I seen an uptick. And we're always looking for something that's off the wall or a little bit different than what other people are doing. And this came off as like, man, this is really awesome. And you had a lot of bucks on days strategy, category to where you'd been successful year after year after year on the new moon. And just go ahead and break down, or first introduce yourself and then break down the new moon process that you have, because I can't call it a theory because it's working. A theory is like something that you're trying to prove.
You're testing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a theory;
Right.
it's a process.
And my name's Damian Riffle, obviously, and I have about 25 bucks under my belt for using this theory, or the vast majority of them, probably 90% of them, have all been killed in a 7-day window of the October new moon. Right when everyone's like, oh, it's the October lull, that's typically when I'm tagging out. And it's all based around the new moon of October. So it's pretty much the new moon, whatever the new moon falls on. Like this year, it's the 16th. It's 3 days prior and 3 days after, so it's a 7-day window really that I look at, and I'm hunting only evenings, and typically some type of food source, and if not a food source, and a transition from where they're bedding to food source typically.
Yeah, so when I listened to that, I was like, man, this is like the complete opposite of what a lot of people say. They're saying, the full moon, right after the full moon is when they're getting the best
2
movement.
days prior, 2 days after.
And I've really never seen that. It seems like you hit the full moon, you see. I mean, the moon hasn't really affected our movement a lot. It seems like, But I mean, we're not hunting in October. We're talking October here. So in the rut, I haven't seen it affecting us a lot. But
No.
this year, I'm going to. Talking to Heath, listen to this podcast, I'm going to pay attention to the moon a lot more. You hear the moon talk, and you're like, man, really? But then you hear enough respectable people talk about it, and you're like, all right, there's something here.
Yeah.
There's enough people talking about it. I got to dive in. So I'm diving in, and like I said, after listening to your podcast, I went back, looked at the new moon, looked at my trail cam data, and I was like, okay, all right, yeah, this is clicking here. Something's clicking for me, too. And anything that I can get one little tick up, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm gonna try.
I don't think it's right for everybody. Now typically I'll say the reason it works for me is I feel I'm typically hunting one specific buck, or maybe two specific bucks, and I know where he's bedding, I know where he's feeding, and I get right in on top of him. And I feel like with the new moon, if you can get in to his core area where he's hanging out and spending the vast majority of his time, I feel like that new moon in that 7-day window, he's going to get on his feet earlier in one of those days, and present you the opportunity, that typically he doesn't normally give you, and it's year after year. I kind of stumbled into it, I guess, in 2003 is the first buck I killed in the new moon. And I didn't really put it together then, but looking back, that was the start of it. The next year I shot one in the same time frame, and then the next year I shot one in the same time frame, and that's really when it started kind of clicking for me, that I was like, wait a minute, this is not coincidental that I'm shooting these bucks that I'm getting photos of that are all nighttime photos. I'm getting an opportunity to kill them in the same window. And then it was another year and another year and another year. And now I'm, 17 years later, and 25 deer, between my deer, my wife's deer, and deer that I've put buddies on, have all been killed in that window. So there's definitely, you can believe it or not, but it's proven itself to me. So I feel like there's definitely something to it.
Yeah, and like you said, it could be, per property or area or anything like that. But what we're seeing is big deer, no matter where they're at, they do big deer shit. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
You could go 100 miles away and big deer is still doing big deer stuff. If you go 100 miles away and you see a big deer in this area, pretty good chance next year there's going to be another big deer in that area. You know what I mean?
Right.
If there's a big deer there, he likes to be there. If he's doing something, another buck's going to be doing that, in the next years. You know what I mean? And that's something that I've seen consistently.
There's a reason why they're doing it.
Yeah.
There's a reason they've made it to that age, and there's a reason behind everything they do. And, when they're comfortable and they have cover and food, and there's a process to everything they do. And when you kind of decode that, I think that has a lot to do with the moon phase as well, is kind of learning a property, knowing how they move, knowing how they use the topography, the structure, everything, and then putting yourself in those positions when you know that they're going to be on their feet earlier in the day, gives you those opportunities to kill them.
Yeah. The moon theory you have, to break it down, is during that new moon, that 6-day period or 7-day period, they're going to daylight or be up earlier than they ever would be because there's less moonlight, basically. It's going to get darker earlier.
Correct.
So they're going to be up earlier.
And typically you're looking for with the new moon, you're looking for that moon underfoot. So what that means, after that last podcast, I had a couple other people, message me by what does that mean, moon underfoot? It's basically, when it's overhead, it's obviously straight over your head. You get that rising moon coming up straight overhead, and you want that rising moon to be basically overhead in those natural primetime movement hours, right at, last hour of daylight. And then transversely, when it's underfoot, it's exactly that. It's on the other side of the earth, directly below your feet. You want it one of those two places. And typically with the new moon, you're looking at having that moon underfoot, typically in those evening hours.
Yeah, and we've heard on a lot of other podcasts and ours, that people that pay attention to the moon are really big on that underfoot and overhead times corresponding with that feeding time in the evening, and have huge success with that. And like I said, that's something that I haven't put a lot of emphasis in following, and this year I'm going to, after listening to your podcast. So if you guys want to learn more about this theory, you break it down really good in the Exodus episode. After listening to this, go there. He breaks it down into really depth, but we're going to dive a little deeper in this one, and we're going to talk about individual bucks, when you killed them in that cycle of the new moon. I was really impressed by, towards the end of that episode, you were naming off the dates, and it was the 3rd day into the cycle. It was the 5th day into the cycle. It's super awesome that you have all that data compiled. I feel like a lot of people kill deer and they're like, it was November 3rd, but they don't know the wind direction. They don't know the temp. They don't know And it seemed like you had that stuff down, you know what I mean? Which was,
and that stuff is like burned into my memory.
yeah, which is
the whole
awesome.
The whole Exodus podcast started from, I was referred to them to do the Whitetail Cribs episode. And, I went through a lot of those stories in that Whitetail Cribs episode, and people were messaging me on Facebook and stuff, like, how in the world do you remember all those details? And I don't know, but like it's burned into my memory down to the times that I've shot them, the dates that I shot them. And, I could tell you the weather conditions and, all that stuff is just, I probably should write it down, and maybe I could even put some more, information together by doing that instead of just, going off of memory. But
yeah, homie's the same way.
I got just kind of a thing for numbers. I just all of a sudden remember numbers pretty good. and
I'm always like, what day was that? He's like, 3rd.
Yeah.
11 o'clock, 11:28. Like, he just knows, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm the guy, like, I'm looking over him like, okay, he's going to know. He's going to know. See, I'm the opposite. I got to write down everything or I'll forget literally everything. Like, I'm absolutely terrible. So let's dive into that. I mean, $25 over the last, which you said 17 years. Right, 17 years. I remember that. Not bad,
That's
right?
Nice. That's nice. Those are odd numbers too.
Yeah. So, kind of pick out some of the most memorable bucks you had, and then I think it'd be cool if the people even went to the Whitetail Cribs episode after this, and being able to see the deer and go from there, because you're not killing just like 120 deer. You're killing really solid deer.
All of them are 4.5 years old or older, 4.5 to 7.5 years old, and all of them are 140s to 180 or just shy of 180. So they've all been pretty solid deer. Now I put buddies on a couple of those mature bucks that I didn't particularly want to shoot, that were a little lesser scoring, that just wasn't what I was looking for. And those deer were, 130s type deer or whatever, but, they're still in that age category of mature deer. So doing what mature deer do.
Yeah, for sure. So, out of those bucks, let's just pick a few that you're, most happy with, most, best hunt, whatever you want to go. And let's break down the buck, kind of describe him, describe the setup that you're in, what day of the new moon, and kind of how you approach that hunt. And I think there's a lot. I was listening to that episode and I was wishing it was like an hour longer and you could dig into these details. You know what I mean? So I messaged Jake and I was like, "Hey, we're gonna have this dude on." Like, I let him know. You know what I mean? I'm like, "I appreciate you finding him. We're gonna have him on and kind of dig deeper," and kind of gave him the heads up and the attaboy for finding you, because that's what we try to do. We try to find guys like you that are out there, kind of low key, getting it done with a tactic. You know what I mean? So go ahead, dive in wherever you want, and let's just break down the details of the new moon and how you were successful.
Well, we'll go with the first buck that I killed on the new moon, and that was 2003, and he was a big 9-point, and that was kind of back in the kind of younger years of trail cameras. I believe it was just I know for a fact I was still running some film cameras at that time. So the SD cards hadn't even gotten extremely popular.
Man, isn't that crazy? That's only 17 years ago?
It wasn't that long ago.
Nuts.
Yeah.
And, so I was getting photos of this deer, and they were all nighttime photos and everything. And there's a little food plot, and I had a feeder out in it, and everything was nighttime. And then as that new moon was approaching, which I wasn't paying attention to it at that time, I started getting photos of him closer to daylight. And then 3 days before the new moon, I got a glimpse of him, and he ended up winding me, and the wind shifted a little bit. It was kind of one of those light variable wind nights, and he snorted, and he just kind of nervously turned and walked off. And then the next night, I saw him again, and this time he was coming in much more cautious, and the wind direction was good, but he circled way downwind and ended up catching me again. And I was like, man, I was kind of disgusted, that he had kind of had my number at this point, and I knew he was on to me at that point. So I'm like, well, if this is going to happen, he obviously knows that I'm hunting this field edge. So I need to adjust my tactic to kind of go after him. So both times that I had seen him, he kind of approached from the same route. And I went down in the field edge about, I was probably 50 yards in, and I found a poplar tree in there that I could get up in, and I couldn't get real high, but there's a small fork in it, and hung a stand, and I hunted it that night, which was the new moon, and that deer, I saw him down in the bottom, and that deer started coming up the hill, and he would zigzag. He would walk up about 5 yards, and he would walk 40 to 50 yards away from me, and then he would turn and come back 40 or 50 yards, and he would stop. There was like a windrow of trees that he couldn't really get downwind of me, which was one of the reasons why I hung where I hung. And he zigzagged the entire length of that field, scent checking, trying to see if I was, up there hunting. And it felt like it took forever for that deer to work his way up the hill. And finally, right before last shooting light, he stepped into a lane, and I shot him at about 15 yards. And that was the first one that I killed on a new moon. He was big, huge body deer, probably still to this date one of the biggest deer that I've ever killed body wise. Score wise, he's right at that 140 mark. Just a really big mainframe 9. He's a mainframe 8, I guess, with a split brow. So.
Do you think getting these multiple encounters with these deer, or being able to see them come in from a distance, helps you be more relaxed, like in the moment of trying to get it done?
To a point. I feel, and some people, I feel it gets them more worked up because they can't talk themselves down. But I feel like I've going back into like my military experience, in my younger days, that I kind of thrive under pressure, and I perform well when pressure's on me, and I can kind of talk myself down. So I feel like if I see a buck and he's a shooter, and I don't have that time to kind of talk myself down, I feel like I make the mistakes, or I feel like maybe they're not mistakes, but looking back, I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or however. And I feel like I do. I make mistakes, make kind of rookie moves, I guess, because I don't have that time to like process and be like, okay, this is going to happen, and put myself in that deer's shoes. A lot of times when I see a deer coming in from a distance, I'm like, okay, what's he going to do? Where's he going to move? How's he going to use this terrain to try to, scent check where he's going or what he's doing, or, run and doze or whatever. And I try to put myself 2 steps ahead of what that deer is doing. Whereas transversely, if you see that deer and he's right there at 30 yards and he's coming quick, you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, grabbing your bow, getting hooked up, whatever the case may be. I feel like those are more accident prone situations.
Yeah, I would say usually 9 times out of 10, it's usually my scenarios are fly by the seat of my pants and bad shit happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Last October, I had a scenario play out, and it was actually it was gonna start out being kind of balls to the wall, but then he kind of bumped out into the food plot, and it kind of slowed out. But I thought he was on edge. I just read his body language different than what it actually was, and I think that can also go into your mind as you think a deer's on edge or something, and he's really not. And being able to read that body language correctly can really affect how you approach your shot, or if you stop him, or if he's just out there hanging out, or if he's gonna duck your string or whatever. Being able
Sure.
to read that body language is key, and that was one of the few scenarios that I've been able to have the ability to read it, and I read it wrong. But that's just because most of my encounters while bow hunting are quick. It's I see that deer
Sure.
at 50 yards, and boom, he's in my lap in 4 seconds.
Are you hunting mostly like rut hunt transition or funnels and stuff like that?
Yeah, most of these encounters are at the beginning of November,
Yeah.
through the 20th of November.
So
But
typically the deer's on the move. He's going from point A to point B, just out seeking, and
yeah,
there's
and
that's
then on these couple, oddball hunts that I've had in October where I've encountered a good buck that I want to shoot, it's just kind of played out wrong because I haven't had that many encounters in that scenario, and it's just proven out in the hunt. It is what it is, and that's something that I'm trying to work on. So, just being able to see that deer multiple times, I think would help in the moment, because you're not just like enamored by, oh shit, there's a shooter. Being
right.
able
And
to,
a lot of that, you know, I'm almost kind of jealous of um, younger people eh, eh, that are not necessarily just getting into hunting, but guys that don't know, that have never hunted without the ability to have trail cameras out there. I was in my 20s, my early 20s, when trail cameras were, I was out of the military at 22, and trail cameras were still, just kind of fledgling things. And like I said, they were still film cameras, and you get your films full, and you go and spend $6 to get the film developed, and you have 9 squirrels, a doe, and a bird, and it to
God,
have that
yeah,
ability.
the
I wish.
anticipation's on a whole nother level when you got to go get it developed.
Right.
oh, yeah, yeah.
I wish that, looking back now, that I had the ability to have trail cameras out in the woods and to learn and do what I do now when I was younger, and I really didn't even get serious into, trophy hunting until I was out of the military and moved home. When I was in the military, it was still, I was hunting, I was a huge bow hunter still, but I was hunting, 5 different states, shooting 15 deer a year with my bow, and hunting, Carolinas and Virginia and Ohio and West Virginia and all these different places, but none of them were anything substantial. It was more, just I was deer hunting, but you didn't have the ability to see what's out in the woods. And I think, with trail cameras and the way they are now, and there's not a deer. You'd be hard pressed to find a deer in Ohio that's not on somebody's trail camera someplace. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it there's not that, like, surprise factor that you would have. 25 years ago, you had a 135-inch deer walk by you, you were going to shoot it because you didn't know if there's anything bigger out there. Now, there's bigger out there, and maybe that 135 just doesn't do it anymore for you.
Yeah, it
So,
definitely changed the game. If that's like us, sometimes we'll go into a public piece and have no intel at all, and we'll just go in there like, here we go.
If it
Right.
gets me fired up, I'm shooting.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the same thing we go through there. You know what I mean? Like, it could be 5:30, and you got an hour of daylight left, but if 140's out there, you're like, shit,
yeah.
I'm pretty jacked right now, but
Right.
and you have no idea. You're sitting in that stand, you're like, a 200, 220 could come out right now, and have no idea that it's even
yeah,
here.
literally the possibility is pretty high that it can
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
and
The area that we hunt, it's just good genetics around here. You know what I mean? So a big deer popping up somewhere random it isn't impossible. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So having a 180-inch deer come out, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
it could happen.
When people
So-
find dead heads and sheds and stuff, and it gets around the town, you know what I mean? So
right.
And then when you have an encounter with a good buck or whatever, you kind of know what's in the area and shit happens.
Yeah, we've said it multiple times that without trail cameras, our whole entire strategy of hunting would be different. It's just
Oh yeah, everybody's is.
it'd be a completely different outlook on how we hunted. I mean, if we went off what we seen in the summer, we'd be hunting a place right now where there's absolutely zero deer.
No deer at all.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
props to the guys that were getting it done back then before they had trail cams and the knowledge to get it done. There's guys out there getting it done on giant deer every year. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
woodsmanship. Trail cameras did take some woodsmanship away. I know that, but
for sure.
I feel like back then, though, I mean, people were out there trying to fill the freezers and get some food. A lot more, and they hunted a lot more because of that fact that they needed to get. Everybody had 8 kids.
I mean,
what I mean?
A solid 120. I mean, you're like, hell yeah.
Everybody had 8 kids that they needed to feed, so they're like, I got to get in the woods and hunt solid time to be able to feed all these kids, and that's what I need. If I had 8 kids, you know how much I'd be like, babe, no way we're feeding these kids.
All right, rewind. Let's get that.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Be like, all right, there's no way we're feeding all these kids. I'm about to hunt all of October. I got to take it off work. We got to get some food in the freezer because I ain't feeding these kids any other way.
Gives you a good reason to. Right?
Yeah. But
so that was the first one. I guess I'm trying to think of some of the more exciting ones. My first one, my 170, I shot him October 18th. That was the day before the new moon. I shot him at 5:15 in the evening, and there's a couple apple trees on the farm that I had kept trimmed up, and they produced apples pretty good every year. And that buck was coming into him, and I was getting photos of him, and I got him. I went in. I would go in and check that camera at lunchtime. And a lot of I feel like a lot of my success is the ability with my work and everything to do exactly that, to run in at lunchtime, check cameras if I need to, have the ability to get out for an evening hunt if I want, because, a cold front's coming through or whatever. A lot of success, if you pay attention to successful hunters that have killed a lot of deer, a lot of them have those type of jobs where they can just be in the woods, when they need to be in the woods. So a lot of times we're not better hunters. We just have the ability to be there when we know we need to be there and get it done that way. And that's what happened with this buck. I went in at noon and I had checked my camera, and the night before he had come through right at very last light. The evening, it was kind of a fence crossing funnel there, and where you go out to the apple tree, and I had him there just before dark, and then right before daylight the next morning, I had him going back into the timber. So I knew he was close, or should have been close, because they don't typically move that much, that late after the morning. So I knew he should be typically within 100, 150 yards or so. It was pretty thick in there, so he had plenty of bedding. And so I was like, well, I got to get here. So I got in there, got up in the stand about 4:30, and just kind of got settled in and situated. And I heard a twig snap down the hill, and I looked, and I saw legs, and I pulled up my binos, and I saw it was a little spike buck, and he kind of worked his way up, and they were kind of circling kind of downwind of those apple trees and heading up to the fence crossing, and the small spike almost went underneath me, and he turned and went up through the fence crossing and up into the apple tree. And then I heard something else below me, and I looked, and I was kind of just dumbfounded that, there he was at 5:15 in the evening, 170-inch deer that I had no daylight photos of at all, standing there in broad daylight, sun shining on him, like, just like a mythical creature standing there. And he comes up, and there was a lot of beech in there, and he was kind of underneath the beech tree. And I didn't know it, but there was some does that had come in, and I don't know if they scented the base of my tree, because the wind was wrong for the lock-ons I had in there, so I took a climber in that day. And I don't know if they smelled where I was at the base of the tree or what, but they kind of like spooked when he was at like 15 yards underneath this beech tree. They kind of just, how they get when they get to the base of the tree and they smell something, they just kind of bound and take a few leaps or whatever. Or I don't know if they did it from my scent, or if the fact that he was coming up the hill kind of pushed him away. But either way, they kind of spooked a little bit and kind of startled me, because I didn't even know they were there. And he kind of stopped and just was kind of surveying everything. And then he turned and he came up into my shooting lane, and I self-filmed it. And he turned to kind of walk up towards the fence crossing, and I shot him at like 19 yards, and kind of a hard quartering shot, and he ran 40 yards and stopped and tipped over dead right there. So that was a pretty memorable hunt for me there, just because he was my first buck to hit the magic 170 mark.
Oh yeah. So that one was 2 days before the new moon. What was the first one?
The first one was on the new moon.
On the new moon. So are you seeing? I know you've said both, but are you killing more before the new moon or after?
The majority of the ones I've killed in the new moon have been the days going into. So it's the 3 days prior to up to the new moon, but I have killed several the 2 days after the new moon. So that's why the 3 days after the new moon. So that's why I incorporate those two. But the majority of them seem to be going into that new moon, leading up to it.
And so I know like a lot of people are going to say, oh, it's a cold front, but a cold front can't happen every year the same time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
So how many of these hunts? That's kind of why I want to have you on the podcast. I wanted to break this down because when you listen to it, I know there's a lot of people assuming stuff when they listen.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how many of these were associated with a cold front or something like that?
Several of them, obviously. If you can get that new moon, like the perfect scenario would be, like say the 15th is the new moon, and the 14th you get a cold front come in where you get like a nice 10-degree, 15-degree temperature drop from 70 to 55 or so, and you get that transition, moon underfoot the last hour of daylight or something along that. That's like the perfect scenario. And when those days happen, which are few and far between, when you try to get all the stars to align, those days, like my confidence level going into the woods is just through the roof that I'm going to see the deer that I'm after. But I kind of covered that on the Exodus podcast, and there would be times that I would sit out, and I always felt, obviously I feel like weather kind of trumps the moon phase if you get a cold front or whatever. But there's my 180 that I killed, the year I shot him, which was 2018, we had a really hot snap in Ohio there, right in the middle of October, right in the middle of the new moon. It was 92 degrees for like 2 days, and I sat him out. And I run wireless cameras, and the one night, the first night I sat out, sat at home, it was 91 degrees. And I'm like, there's no point in hunting. Nothing's going to move in this heat. It was humid, just hot, miserable. And sure enough, right at last light, I get a Spartan goes off, and I look at my camera, and there he is right at last light and feeding through the oaks. I was like, well, dang, I screwed up. I can't believe he was moving, So The next night it was even hotter. I think it was 93 degrees. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to hunt again. I missed my chance yesterday, and that was kind of stupid. And lo and behold, my, phone goes off at prime time again, and shooting light, there he is standing at a corn feeder of all things, which, that one really surprised me, because I just don't feel like big mature deer, are that, susceptible to be shot over a corn feeder, because they've been around the block a few times. So that kind of changed my outlook on the cold front phase, or the weather side of the moon. But to the point that if I'm on a specific deer and I want to kill him, if the wind is right, I'm going to be in a stand someplace to put myself in the position to kill that deer, whether it's 90 degrees or 55 degrees or 50 degrees or whatever. So I just feel that deer was pretty special. I mean, I had his pattern figured out really well. The previous year, honestly, I feel like he was 5 inches bigger as a 4-year-old than he was a 5-year-old. He has a slight non-typical. He had a big 12-inch double main beam, and I was really hoping he'd blow up into a 200. But he, right when I had figured out his pattern in 2017, he showed up and snapped his entire right side off, like 2 inches above his pedicle.
Oh man!
So the real kick to the junk on that one was, like, I had just figured out his pattern. I thought for sure that my opportunity to kill him was coming up soon, and his running mate all summer was just a stud 165-inch, 23.5-inch wide 10-point. And he started showing himself in that new moon phase, and I took my wife in, and she killed him for her first compound bow kill. And then it was, I think the day or the day after that, is the one I was targeting showed up, and it broke his entire beam off. I was like, no. So going into 18, when I killed him, I had his pattern figured out, and where he was summering and was probably a half a mile away, and he would summer on about 15 acres. He would bed on the property that I had leased, and he would feed in the neighboring soybean field. And I planted a small soybean section right up on top on the backside of that bedding area. And I just got amazing photos of him up there during the summer growing. Just like, I got a really cool photo of him skylined with the full moon in the background. Like, it's just, it was like a calendar type location for him. And then when he would shed velvet, as he did the year before, he disappeared right, mid to late September. And, the year before, it took me about 2.5 weeks to figure out where he moved to. And this year, or then 2018, when he disappeared, I knew where exactly to go look for him. And when I did, I spread out my cameras and picked him up the day that I moved my cameras. And he jumped right back on the same pattern that I had him on the year before that he broke off. And so at that point, I knew for certain in my mind that I was going to get the opportunity to kill him, because I was already, 2 weeks ahead of where it was the year before. So, and then I ended up shooting him October 18th in the second day after the new moon.
Nice. So when I asked you to come on, I looked at the extended forecast, and I was like super jacked. I've been telling homie I was jacked about what's going
on. Yeah, it looks
on.
pretty amazing for the new moon.
Yeah, so the new moon is the 15th, right?
16th.
The 16th, okay. The day before the new moon.
It's why we're always a day off.
You got a low of 37.
Yeah.
High of 58. The day before the new moon. The day before that, you're 70 and 50.
Yeah.
So you're talking a 10 to 13 degree temperature drop the day before the new moon on a Thursday that I probably will be leaving early from work. But
All right.
I was really jacked when I had you come on talk about the new moon, and I looked at it. I looked at the extended forecast. I was like, man, shit, the stars are aligning here,
Yeah.
boys.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I shit you not, I've had probably 4 different people text me or message me on Facebook screenshots of that cold front.
yeah, it's like it looks like the cold front's going to stay here for a while, but what we seen was the second day of this first cold front was really good. And this is
Yeah,
going to be
and
the second
think
day.
that's kind of the second day always seems to be the sweet spot. I
Yeah.
feel like, and the same thing with like turkeys. If you ever notice, you get like crappy weather turkey hunting, and then you get those bright sunny mornings, and it's just blue sky days. It always seems like by the third day the turkeys are just tearing the woods up in the spring.
It's just like
And-
they've been honed down and then
right,
it's like
and
all
then like
pent up
by
and they're
day
ready
3
to
they're
rip.
just full bore going
Yeah.
nuts. Well,
Yeah.
deer I feel like are kind of the same way with cold fronts. They, a day or two after the cold front is when they really seem to kind of kick in, and especially late season, you get a really cold snap and you have a food source, and you get down into those single digits and negative temps at night. By the third day, those deer they're cold and they're hungry and they're coming to food.
So the main thing is we're releasing this Wednesday the 14th, guys. Okay, it is 2 days before the new moon, and it is 1 day before this cold front hits. So the guys that are listening to this that want to try
short-term
this,
vacation plans.
tactics out. If you can get out in the evening and hunt,
Yeah, I would be on a food source. If you have a target buck and you have an idea where he's bedding for the most part, and you have done your homework and you know where he's going to feed or he's been showing up to feed, I would say your probability of seeing him on the hoof and is probably right there the day before the new moon on the 15th.
the buck behind the pond, homie. The buck behind the pond. 14th, 15th.
All right.
Going
Let's
down.
go.
We got a buck pinned down real solid. Just waiting to strike.
Wait for it to get cold again.
And this is the moment. This is the moment right here. So,
Hopefully it doesn't throw any goofy, screwy winds at us, and
west northwest.
Yeah, so you should be
I'll take
solid
it.
with those.
I need a northwest for the way he's going. Northwest is what I need.
We're gonna hunt the
Perfect.
dam or the walnut.
I'm gonna hunt in between somewhere in there.
Try to catch him in transition.
Yeah, we got a buck going to a scrape. Last cold front, he went to the scrape. A scrape hit it about an hour after dark, and he was coming back 3 days in a row during this cold front, and then pulled another cam, and he was up. After he'd hit that scrape, going back in this area later than he was on the scrape, going right into where we thought he was bedding, and it just combined the pieces, and I was like, we always talk about going with the gut and feeling, you feel like it's deers in this area by your trail cam pictures, and it was on a mobile, and I don't know why in our brain we feel like we got something figured out, but in our mind we're like, where this deer is bedding, he shouldn't be there. Like, there's no reason for him to be there. It's dumb, silly
But
spot.
that's why he's there.
And in my mind, I'm like, there's no way he's there, you know what I mean? And then you pull the other cam, you're like, damn it, this deer was there the whole time, you know what I mean?
whole
And I
time.
knew it, but I was just, and he's going to be there again, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
I'm thinking, that's why when I had you on, the whole time I'm thinking, man, this buck cruise in, that north wind, slip in the backside, catch him coming to that scrape just like he was. He's going to be up earlier, feeding along the edge of that cornfield, and we're going to be there.
Nice, this year, the new moon being the 16th, you're starting to get that. Their testosterone levels are starting to get a little bit higher. That scraping activity is going to be getting a little bit higher. They're still in their core areas. They're not out wandering around looking and, testing the waters, I guess, of neighboring farms and stuff like that. And, for the most part, it of the month like that, because they're still, you start getting into the latter part of the month, they're starting to get the legs on them. They're going to start wandering to the neighbors to see if, what does are hanging out over here. And whereas, that 15th, they're still, test levels are still rising. Their scrape activities really starting to pick up. Their rubbing activities really picking up, and they really start to transition from that, summertime looking buck to that swollen neck, just monster,
Yeah.
and that time frame right there in the middle is when I feel like you're really
I'm super
susceptible.
jacked right now. I'm super jacked that this is
Yeah,
all.
next.
Stars are aligning. It's good. Next week at work, if I'm working anywhere close to you, it's gonna be brutal. I'm gonna be like, I'm out. I'm not even here right now. I'm leaving at noon. So
Trucker clock at
yeah,
noon.
yeah, trucker clock at noon. I'm out. But
Right.
it looks like extending forecast is a lot of bucks are gonna die here.
I hope
If
so.
it stays,
It's
it
looking
stays
good.
so.
I mean, this is kind of one of the cooler Octobers that I remember. The last several, it seemed like it stayed pretty warm all the way up until the end of October and into November. Some of
Yeah.
them years. So,
Homie, the
you know,
19th is it's saying rain.
That's a Tuesday.
It's saying rain. It's a Monday.
Monday, okay.
Rain and 36. That's like your bread and butter that time of year on the
Bro,
scrapes.
Yeah.
there you
Bro.
go.
Hitting those
Look out.
scrapes.
Look out.
Yeah.
Is it rain in the morning? Or
Yeah,
it probably
rain.
doesn't
It's
say
saying
that far
yeah.
out?
It's saying
If it says AM rain,
yeah.
don't say it says AM rain.
Scrapes are on.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah, those are the ones I like when you get those cold fronts like that, and then the rain, and it stops or late afternoon, and the going into another story. It's my 165. I shot him. It was September 30th, but the October new moon that year was like the first, I believe, or the second, and ended up shooting him on September 30th, which was opening week, obviously in Ohio, and it was the temperature that day. It was like 57 during the day. It showed that it was going to drop like 10 degrees or 12 degrees the last like hour and a half of daylight, and it had rained all day long, just that like drizzling, just rain, miserable to be out in. You get wet, and I'm like, man, and it was calling for it to stop, closer to the, prime time. And I'm like, oh, you got a cold front coming in, you got rain all day. It's supposed to stop. I'm like, I got to get in the woods, So at that time, I had my buddy that was filming me. I had him. I'm like, called him up. I was like, dude, you got to get out of the wood, work early tonight and get down here. I'm like, it's going to happen. And we got in there and got set up, and we were in a elevated blind, and it was a pop up on an elevated blind platform there, and it would start raining, and it was like torrential downpours, and I'm like, man, it's supposed to stop, and it was like gusting winds, and then it would stop, and every time it would stop, deer would like pour out into this clover field that I had planted, and they'd feed around a little bit, and another like storm would move in, and the wind would blow, and it'd like clear the field, and then it did that like 2 or 3 times, and then the last one was an absolute, like, we were hanging on to the blind, like the wind was like trying to blow it away, and it was just like crazy. And then it stopped, and about 5 minutes after it stopped, like a little glint of sun kind of peeked through the cloud, and you could just feel that, like, that as that storm came through, you could feel that temperature just plummeting, right? It went from like that warm rain to just like bone chilling, like chill. And 5 minutes after it stopped, I looked over to my right, and that buck was stepping out into the field, and it was I think 6:45 or 7. He was 7:05 is what that one was, and he kind of started heading out into the field and started trotting out into the middle. And granted, at him 3 times, he stopped, and I shot him at 35 yards, and he ran about 110 yards and piled up. But yeah, that was a good hunt too.
Had it completely stopped, or was it still kind of in?
It completely stopped after that last
Okay.
rain. It was like he knew it was done. Like it would rain and get pretty heavy and windy, and then it would stop for like 15 minutes, and the deer would kind of come out of the woods, and then it would rain again. They'd go back in, and then it would stop, and they'd come back out. And it did that a few times as the evening progressed, and that last like nasty pour that it had, and it stopped, and like the cloud like split open and a little ray of sun like shined down, and it was like moments later that buck was standing on the edge. And I think, when you get those rains like that, it gets them on their feet. It stops raining, they're soaking wet, they stand up, they shake it off, and they move around a little bit. And if you're close to where they're bedding, and that field I had put, that I had planted, they bedded just off the east side of it, the southeast side of it. It was an old goat pasture that was all grown up and just multiflora rows, and you couldn't run a rabbit out of it with a beagle if you tried. And then deer would get in there and just bed up and pop out in all times of the day and kind of feed in that field as they felt leisure to.
Yeah, I've seen that with high winds too. Like if you have a cold front with high winds coming in, when those winds stop, deer get up. It's like they can
Yep.
hear, they feel more comfortable. I
Sure,
killed a
they've
buck
been
a few
locked
years
out.
ago, and it was high winds. The trees were shaking. I got in there real close to where I thought he was bedding, and I hung a stand and hunted him. And right when those winds stops, not 5 minutes later, he's up hitting a scrape. I'm like, "Pfft, it didn't take very long, you know what I mean? But he just
Right.
was biding his time. He's like, hey,
Yeah.
it's too windy. I can't hear anything. A lot of stuff going on. Wind stops. No matter when you're hunting, when you get closer to evening, it seems like the wind dies down. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Right. Yep.
In second shotgun season, I've had that happen a couple times. I've been close to bedding, and then you're getting that feeling like it's happening about 4:30, 5 o'clock. You're like, okay, I got an hour until like prime time,
Mm-hmm.
and then next thing you know, you got a buck real close, and you're like, but that wind's dying down with the sun going down, and it just all is
Yeah.
starting to come together.
I think they just
Mhm.
feel so much comfortable. They could probably smell a little better.
Oh, yeah.
Wind ain't blowing.
Sure.
They can hear a little better.
After they've been hunkered down.
Yeah, they've been hunkered down with that
Yeah.
wind blowing
Yeah,
so hard, and then they
when
just
they're,
pop out.
their ears are their defense, their noses are their defense, and their eyes, those are their defenses. And when you have high winds, their sense of smell, their winds gusting, so they can't pinpoint where smell is coming from. Then everything in the woods is moving, so their eyes are designed to pick up movement. And when every stick and every limb and leaf in the woods is moving, they can't pick up movement, and they can't hear. So, they just lay down and hunker down until all that settles down. And once they feel safe to where they can kind of, get their surroundings under control again, they get up and start, feeding around and just kind of being deer.
Yeah, that's something not to overlook. But I don't know how many people has come on this podcast and said right after a rain is when I killed, or it rained and then I went out and it died, or it started misting and then I killed.
Yeah. I mean, I told my story of my 180 on the Exodus, so I won't go over that too in depth, because that's I mean, he's obviously my biggest buck, but the way that story haul and hunt all went down is amazing. But that day it rained most of the day, and stopped at 4 o'clock. And it stopped at 4 o'clock right as I pulled in. I didn't get on stand till 4:30, and I felt I was kind of behind the 8 ball getting in the stand, because I bumped a couple does that were already up on their feet. I get on stand, get situated, and at 5:15 I saw him way down in the bottom come out, and it took him about 45 minutes to work his way that 300 and some yards towards me. But that was right after rain stopped as well. So
Yeah, we've had multiple people come on, and right after that rain, dude, people don't want to go out because it's raining. They don't want to get wet and suffer through it. Homie tried to do that here just a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
but the rain never stopped.
Dumb.
Yeah, that's
So-
the worst is, when you get out there and it starts raining while you're out there and it rains the rest of the, like that's the last thing. But if I can get out there and I look at the weather and it's supposed to stop at that last hour of daylight or last hour and a half of daylight, I will go get wet to be there when it stops, because you don't want to wait for it to stop and then go and get in the woods, or you're too late. You need
Yeah, it
to
was-
be in your stand ready when that rain stops, because it happens instantaneously. I feel like once that rain stops, them deer stand up out of their beds, shake off, and start kind of meandering around, whether they go in open scrapes or just kind of mill around. They've been hunkered down getting wet all day, so they're up moving around again.
Yeah, this hunt was like literally the closest we had been to this bedding area. All of the extra, everything else has been lining up. We had some pretty good access to this spot to crush in, especially in early October, and went in there, and the weather's supposed to stop raining at 5:30. So I'm like, okay, I'll be able to get in there, get quiet. It's still going to be, pretty soft on the ground to get in there, get on this oak flat, maybe go a little past. We're going to kind of do some scouting on the way in, see what it looked like. There was a couple trees about 100 yards past that oak flat to get in and get set up. The oak flat looked good, but I went in and pressed in, got set up, and I looked at the radar when I got everything set up, and the green blob just kept growing over the Mississippi. It
just kept getting worse and worse.
growing. I'm like, all right, let's look at the future. Okay, the future looks good. All right, let's look at the present. Okay, yeah. It was supposed to stop raining an hour ago. Where is this at? It just kept over the Mississippi. It either dies out or it keeps growing.
Yeah, one or the other.
And this thing just kept growing.
Yeah,
And
it was like
got wet.
We had
all
southeast,
night.
which is a weird wind for us. It was like the perfect access to backdoor in between this bedding and oak flat that we thought he was feeding in, our giant public land deer that we're after, and homie goes way in there, super radical to get into during a rainstorm. And I'm at home with my kids. It's my kid's birthday. And I'm like, this dude's killing tonight. The whole time I'm like,
the odds are super high.
yeah, I'm like, this dude is killing a 190-inch deer tonight. And I'm going to have to go out there and drag him out at dark.
I sent Cody a pin when I got to 3. I was like, here we are.
Yeah, he sent me a pic. I'm like, oh, you're in the money.
Yeah.
If you made it that far,
Like,
you are
dude,
so
if I was
solid.
at home and I got that pin, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I was super jacked, and just never stopped raining. He had some encounters that night, but man,
Yeah.
it just kept raining, and that buck never showed up, of course. But if it would have stopped raining, man,
Man,
it would have been.
if it would have stopped raining at 5:30 like it was supposed to, I feel like it was a really good
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah. So we've been literally like betting 100 on every hunt. You know what I mean? How much you got to put on the line? I got $100. All right, I'm putting it all on right now. October 4th. Here we go.
Yeah. Right?
But it is what it is. But hey, man, we don't want to take up all your night, but I appreciate you coming on. You've put out some absolute incredible content for Exodus and us. And with this new moon coming up, with this cold front, I wanted to have you on again just to blast this to some more people. Our ultimate goal is to make everybody that listen to us be successful. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And if
And
we
like
can
I
help
said-
that be any way, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? We want to do it. So we appreciate you coming on and sharing this, knowledge that you
absolutely.
found out.
If it helps one person kill the deer they're after and maybe they start using it more than
Yeah, it's
than
so worth
they
it at that point. You know what I mean?
anticipated, it's worth it. But it's not. Nothing about deer hunting is a given science, and everybody's got their own. If you talk to 100 guys that are continuously killing big deer, they're all going to have some sort of pattern that they're doing it in, and probably no two will be identical. So there's no right or wrong or set in stone way of doing it. You just have to find what works for you and what works for your property, and take advantage of whatever you can and any weaknesses that you can find in their patterns,
All right, guys. This cold front is coming. The new moon
Is it coming in your ear holes?
It's right. It's close. It's like a day away. You know what I mean? This extended forecast is showing it's going to happen. Get out in the woods. Get that target buck. Get whatever you got going on down. Hope you have a successful year and you get it done in the next 3 days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's what this episode's about. We wanted to release this guy to you guys right before this cold front's lining up perfect. You know what we say. Always do the right thing. Leave a legacy and go kill a freaking buck. And Whitetail Legacy is out.